What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York. We are at the Times Square Hotel, and today we have a special interview. We are here with the one and only Lizzy Borden. Thank you so much. It's great to have you here, man. Thank you for meeting with us. I know it's been a busy day today.
It's been a busy few days. Yeah, it's great to be here. I love New York, and it's been a while since I've been here, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you back.
Yeah.
Now, I know you just finished a music video at 6 in the morning.
Yes, I did.
Oh, God, how rock and roll. We don't sleep.
No, there's no sleep.
But My Midnight Things is your latest record, and it's scheduled to come out June 18th?
15th.
15th. Oh, so close. But and it's the first Lizzy Borden record in 11 years.
Yeah.
How was the recording and the songwriting and everything been with it?
Well, when I first started, I the only reason I haven't put out a record is because there was no music structure. The music industry collapsed after right around the time I put out my last record.
Yeah.
And there was no reason to put out another record because there was no structure to support it. No marketing, no nothing. So, but Metal Blade Records have kind of paved the way in how to make it profitable and how to make it work for bands and how to make it work for the company. And they work way outside the lines of a regular record company. So Brian Slayton came to me and talked me into making another record. So when I played him 3 songs that I had, and he loved them, and just said, let's do a deal. So I kind of knew what direction I wanted to go. And the last tour that I did was in Europe, and we played to predominantly young kids, and we were country hopping. Every country. We ended up in Russia, and it was all young kids, and it was all the same reaction every night. They went crazy for it. So that pointed me in the right direction on what this record should sound like and what kinds of songs I needed to write. Yeah. So that was the starter.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Metal Blade has always been the record label. I mean, from signing much older bands to signing newer bands like As They Lay Dying or Whitechapel, but also keeping the older generation alive. I think they really hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, I mean, they started with the classic metal, and then they branched off to what was happening at the time, and then now I think they're coming full circle, and they treat all the bands the same, but they understand the genres that they're in, and they know how to market those genres. So it's yeah. I mean, it's so far it's been a different world with this album than I had in the last 2 albums.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited and interested in seeing how it's all going to go. But so far, it's been really good dealing with this latest release compared to the last 2.
And from hearing you just talk about it, it seems like this isn't kind of just picking up where the last record was or anything. It's kind of like a new era for Lizzy Borden.
It
right?
is. I pushed the restart button on my career because I've just, I was going through lineups like crazy. I've never had the same lineup. I always, other than Joey Scott on drums, I've always had a different lineup per album pretty much.
Okay.
And except for the first couple of years where we had, we still swapped out guitar players or bass players, but it just got to the point where there was no point in keep trying to market it as a band because I'm always going to have a different lineup. It's just the way it goes. I usually have a good eye to find great guitar players, and then someone steals them.
Well, I mean, I think it's cool that you have, as we were talking on the way up here, you work with Ira Black, who plays with, I Am Morbid and Westfield Massacre and Attica 7. I'd imagine with different members that could help you also bring in newer elements with Lizzy Borden.
Yeah, I mean, we had Joe Holmes who joined Ozzy, and he was with Ozzy for 5 years or something like that, and then he was with David Lee Roth. And then Dario Lorena, who was with us for almost 5 years, and now he plays with Black Label Society. So, we've had some amazing talent in this band, but and now I look out. That's why I look out now. I see all the talent out there. So, it's not going to be hard
finding some great players to be in this band, you know, for the Midnight Things tour. Yeah, so I can imagine. And even though this is like the new era of Lizzy Borden, you have a lot of albums out. This is what, like the 12th or?
Nah, well, I mean, technically, yeah, but as far as just straight LPs, it's the 7th.
Okay. Yeah, but I know
we have EPs and live albums and all that stuff.
Yeah. So being that, and you've been doing it for so long now, and has every album that you've ever recorded been kind of like does it get easier recording a record and more or less going through the motions, or has every recording process been a completely different experience?
Yeah, everyone's been completely different. I mean, they've been the only one that was very reminiscent was like we did the Terrorizing EP, and we had done the Menace album before that, and we just did it right after it, and it felt the same. And that's when I realized I needed to learn more because we had peaked as far as our knowledge on how to work in the studio. And so that's when I decided to get a producer and learn how they do it. Mm-hmm. And then the next album was a great big album for us, Visualize.
Yeah.
And then I got another producer for the next one, and that was amazing too. Our biggest record, Master of Disguise. So I had to learn how to do this. And each album I've gotten a little bit better. It doesn't get any easier, but because you keep learning new things. But this album, Midnight Things, was a challenge because I made the mistake of starting with too many songs. I had like 40 songs, and I'm putting all that work into songs that aren't going to make the record. So it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, this is too big of a load of work for songs that aren't going to be there, and I'm recording them as if they were. So finally, I had to cut loose, and I was cutting loose up until the very end. So I just had the ones that felt right, that they worked together on an album. You know, I didn't want to have any standout tracks. I wanted them all to be individual, but also work conceptually under the same umbrella.
Okay, I think that's cool. It's very hard to like maintain a formula without being repetitive, but it's also very hard to like experiment without being all over the place.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, because you could obviously make, you know, a fast song, a mid-tempo song, a ballad, and this, you know, have all this stuff going on, but I didn't want that. I wanted everything to be up-tempo for the most part, dark, but still stand on its own and work together so they don't sound like they could have been on some other album, you know.
Yeah.
So I think I did that. People are saying that this album sounds reminiscent of a cross between Master of Disguise and Visualize, which I think is pretty cool, you know.
Okay. So you kind of just brought up my next question, because what comes first? Do you like to make each record be its own entity and experiment as you're recording new music? Or at the same time, do you kind of like to keep a formula going?
Well, I have my songwriting style, but I try to not fall into that. You know, I know a lot of these bands can churn it out, and all their albums kind of sound the same to me anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's you know, differences, but I don't hear it, you know.
Of course.
And but for me, I try not to, you know, there's certain things with vocals and stuff that I know what I need to do and how to do it. But with other instruments, I try not to fall into the same trap. If I had done something before, chances are I don't want to do it again. So I tried to do something else, and so what I would normally do here, I'll try to do something completely different there, and I won't follow that same pattern that I did on a song I wrote, you know, before. So, you know.
That's impressive to hear, because like, and you know, I'm not going to mention any bands names, but you know, I'm sure you and I could think of bands, they put out like their most successful record, and then they compare every record they do from there to that and repeat it. And being that you said Master of Disguise was like one of your biggest ones, but you didn't just look back, okay, now every record has to sound like that.
No, in fact, we went the opposite direction, you know, every which way that we tried to do, just to be artistic about it. But really, I don't hold my own songs to compare. I look at other great classic songs, and I go, how can I get my songs to sound or to be that great that would stay around for 30 years? You know, and they still get played every day, you know, on some classic rock station or something, you know. And that's my goal. So I don't, you know, before I write lyrics, I listen to Quadrophenia from The Who, you know, and then I listen to all the great classic songs that I grew up on, and I'm like, there's a reason why they're so great, and there's a reason why they've stood the test of time.
Absolutely.
And they all are different from each other, the ones that I like, but they have one quality that is the same, and that's the quality I'm trying to figure out. That's the diamond. Like, how did they do it? You know, and they looked to the people that were before them and said, how did the Stones do that? How did the Beatles do that? You know, so everyone does that, but you need to look at the top in order to do it. So I don't look at my own work to try and riff off that, I look at the bands who have been around for much longer than me and written timeless songs.
Yeah. And I mean, Lizzy Borden has been around since 83, I think.
83, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about what was happening at that time. You know, thrash was on the rise, glam metal was huge. And, you know, then being around from the 90s, grunge was getting big. Did all these changes ever influence you, or were you, or more or less you were just kind of focusing on doing your own thing?
I've never wanted to be part of the scene. You know, it's always been, you know, even when the metal scene started to happen, you know, I got caught up in it a little bit because my guitar players were all into it, but I quickly got bored, you know, and said, okay, I don't want to. This is not what I want to do. I want to write songs. You know, I don't want to write excuses to show how good you are on guitar, you know, and that's kind of what was happening. And I decided, like, we're going to go back to writing songs. And then, you know, so yeah, I never chased it. And when the grunge thing happened, there was just no point in me making a grunge album. And there was no point in me making a regular Lizzy Borden album either, because there was no marketing plan for it. You know, there was still an audience out there, but I couldn't get it to them.
Yeah.
So there was no point.
Yeah, I mean, they said metal died in the 90s, and I don't think so at all with bands like Pantera coming up and everything, but it definitely did change.
Yeah, because there wasn't an onslaught of bands. You know, when you only have one or two that are making waves, that's acceptable. You can manage that, but and they can worm their way through and make it happen. Yeah. But when you have an onslaught of bands, that's when you've got that great wave, and everybody's riding that wave, and there's an infrastructure that happens between radio stations, promoters, and producers, and, you know, everybody that's involved in the music industry. But when all those things slip away, then there's nothing there. Yeah. So that wave is helping people up, but if you live by the wave, you dive by the wave.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they say, a high tide raises all ships, but at the same time, all those ships can sink at the same time.
And they will, yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. Now, one thing I was always curious about with Lizzy Borden is, in addition to your music, I've noticed that there is an imagery. Like, I've seen, like, pictures of your live shows, and it's truly remarkable. Is that, like, an image that you've always had in your mind when forming Lizzy Borden, or did you, like, come up with, like, an image of Lizzy Borden in your head after making music?
Well, for me, it was the first time I saw Kiss. I saw Gene Simmons in full, you know, possessed on stage. And then I saw, you know, and then David Bowie. I was such a huge fan, and especially he was such a chameleon. And the Tubes, you know, Fee Waywill was able to create different characters throughout his show. And then, of course, Alice Cooper. And on down the list, there were so many great theatrical bands, but they had, you know, a lot in common, that they were able to create these personas. So that's what I already knew I was going to do. But I didn't want to have a one-dimensional character where I would just be forced to do it. So I knew that I was going to create new characters. So for every album, I kind of created a new character. I was able to get out of the shadow of the one before it, and have fun, you know, and be able to do different things, and to be able to look at a different way, and still have the persona. But I was able to chameleon-like change it into whatever I wanted throughout the years.
Yeah, and as you changed it, was it just like an image you thought of? And like, how did you get this inspiration for these images? Did you have to hear your music first, or did you maybe like think of an image and wrote your music according to that?
Well, the first one, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just trying to go with it. But I knew right after I did that I wanted to bounce out, and I wanted to completely, you know, when I saw Kiss, you know, they had different costumes for each show, each tour. And I was like, okay, that's a starting point, you know. So I wanted to make sure that I completely scrapped the old show and put a whole new show together with the different production, different costumes, and a different persona. And there was ones that didn't work, you know, because my character with the audience operates a certain way, and more like Kiss, less than Alice Cooper, because I actually talk to the audience. And Bowie never talk to the audience either. And I tried that with one of my characters, and it didn't work. You know, you got to have that kind of charisma where you're just standing there and not saying a word. And I didn't have it. I realized that my character was more frantic and more, you know, the audience was part of the show. So that was the one thing I had to keep threading through all the characters, that he had to engage the audience. He couldn't be standoffish. And like I said, I tried it and it didn't work for me. So, you play around, you figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I learned that real quick.
It's the only way to find out is to give it a try, right? Yeah. So I think you kind of like led me into the next question. I like how this is going. Everything leads into another. Been too many awkward moments of silence. But because you clearly mentioned with the characters that you portray on stage, you're not like really afraid to try new things. It's fair to say you do that with your music, right? Because I see elements of just down and dirty rock and roll. I see classic metal elements. I see some gothic elements in there. So when writing new music, trying new things clearly has never been an issue for you, right?
No, in fact, sometimes, usually all these songs started with the lyrics and the melody first. And that's kind of the way I've always written the melody line first, and then I'll write the music. Because the vocal melody, to me, is the song. If you take away the music and you just have the singer singing, you still have a song. You take away the singer singing, you have a bunch of chords. So, that's the melody is the main part. But I was writing the lyrics as well with that. So then I wrote the music later on most of the songs. Some of it I went the other way, where I'll write it, but I didn't like a verse, so I'd rewrite the whole verse, and sometimes I rewrote it 20 times. But I needed it to do something that it wasn't doing, and I couldn't figure it out until I did, And once I did, it was like, oh, it was right there. It's right there all along. Why didn't I see it?
I've heard too many stories on how like lyrics and vocals are like the absolute last thing.
Yeah.
It's
for
cool.
most people, yeah.
Yeah, and I've always wondered why that is, to tell you the truth.
I did too. When we started the first couple of records, we would go in and we'd rent, a studio that Prince is in, and we would do the drums. Mm-hmm. And then we would spend all the time on the bass, and then we'd spend all the time on the guitar. And they go, okay, Lizzy, you got 2 days to do all your vocals on the whole album. I'm like, I don't get that. Why? How did that happen?
And that obviously puts you under pressure, which doesn't help.
Yeah, and I did the first record in like 2 days. I did the second record in like 3 days. And I just got to the point where I was like, no, this is all backwards. So I remodeled it all to make sure that I had enough time. And when I did the Master of Disguise record, that was the one thing that I wanted. Even Visualize, because I couldn't work with Max Norman the way I wanted to work with him. I ended up doing that whole album in about 2 days, because he was spending so much time on the guitars and the bass and the drums.
Yeah.
And but when I got the Master of Skies record, I go, we're reversing this. And we did. And I had all the time that I wanted, and I spent a lot of time. We spent 5 months on that album, and I don't know how long I spent on the vocals, but I did it until it was done.
Yeah.
And I wasn't under pressure. In fact, I had a great time recording it. It was fun, and it became the biggest selling record. So
clearly something was done right.
Clearly I was right, and that problem needed to be solved. So I solved that.
And that's how the methodology has been.
It's been since. Yeah, that's the way it's been since.
Now, when you're writing the vocal melody, do you also have lyrics in mind too, or does sometimes the melody determine what you're writing lyrically?
Sometimes the lyric will come first before the melody line. And then sometimes I'll have a melody line just swimming in my head. And that's the harder one, because now I have to adapt lyrics to a melody line. So I hate doing that, because, sometimes you've got to stretch a word out, or you've got
too many syllables.
Or you add a word, and it becomes a nightmare, because then now you're screwing up the melody. Because you had a good melody, and now you're screwing it up because you can't get the syllables right. So I try to do both at the same time, which is ideal. And I've done that with a lot of songs. Me Against the World was one of them. I had the lyrics and the melody at the same time, and it worked, and it was easy. And that's the way I like to do it. But sometimes I don't always get what I want.
Yeah. It depends on the song.
Yeah.
But that's cool how every song and every album, as you mentioned, is like a completely different experience.
Yeah.
So clearly that record is a product of what you were going through at that time.
Yeah. This album's called My Midnight Things for a lot of different reasons. But one of the small reasons is I recorded it in my studio in North Hollywood in an industrial area. And most of the time around 3 a.m, where it was dead silence, no cars, no nothing, no people, no noise, except for a fire house down the street.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was the only break in the action. So it's just me in there singing or playing guitar or whatever by myself. So it was kind of it wasn't a negative time, but it was definitely a positive bleakness to it.
Yeah.
And so I was inspired, but at the same time, it was very, isolated.
Okay.
But you can hear it in my voice, and that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to find that. I remember David Lee Roth talking. He recorded "Eat 'Em and Smile" on like Skid Row in the worst part of town, is the worst studio, because he wanted that ambiance. He purposely, he's obviously a millionaire, could have recorded anywhere, but he wanted that ambiance. He wanted to walk out into civilization in a metropolitan area, and he got what he wanted. I mean, that was a great record, and it had that weird, thing to it. So I kind of had that same thing. So, just walking into a studio and recording an album, sometimes if you need inspiration, then you're already in trouble. But I wasn't looking for inspiration. I was just looking for some focus that I could get from this isolation, and I wanted that to be in my voice.
Yeah. It seems like inspiration, like, it could sometimes be helpful, but at the same time, it could also be like your worst enemy. Because if you only make art when you're inspired, like, what if you live in like the North Pole, like, where there's nothing going on? Like, how are you gonna get in? I guess pretty easy to form a black metal band there, but
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to the record, first one in 11 years, and
Yes.
From hearing like the previews and everything, I think that wait was going to be worth it. But I meet a lot of people who are currently in rock bands, whether they're local bands or they're touring, and I've heard a few people say that they do take inspiration from you. And does hearing like how a younger audience does that inspire you in a way? Kind of contradicting what I said with the whole inspiration thing, but
well, it's a different kind of inspiration. Doesn't make me want to go write a song because they like my music. It makes me feel that I'm sitting up at 3 a.m. working on this thing, and then someone finds out and they like it, and they're it moved them in some way. That inspires me. It doesn't. I'm not going to try to make it happen so that will happen again. But at the same time, it's nice that it happens. I hear it all the time. From sometimes pretty famous people, and it just blows my mind every time I hear it, because when I'm tinkering in there at 3 a.m, I'm not thinking about that. But when it happens, it's a great surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lizzy, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, this is Alex from Heavy New York, behind the camera this time. Be sure to pick up the new record, My Midnight Things, coming out June 15th via Metal Blade Records. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We'll see you next time. Lizzy Borden, everyone.
Thank you.